welcome. My name is Peter Hyun, and I'm a partner at Wiley, a Washington, D.C. law firm, and I am a member of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of the Greater Washington, D.C. area. For those of you joining us from around the country, APABA-DC is the oldest and largest association of AAPI lawyers, law students, law professors, recovering lawyers throughout D.C. We have Yankees fans, Ducks fans, Hawks fans, and Jaguars fans. The organization has been around since 1981 and has a threefold mission to first, promote the professional growth of members, second, cultivate an understanding of issues facing the APA community, and third, promote community involvement. Today, we have a rockstar panel of prominent lawyers in sports. And before I introduce them, I'd like to thank the additional co-sponsors of this event. First, the National Asian Pacific American Law Students Association, APABA Virginia, the Asian American Bar Association of New York, and the Georgia Asian Pacific American Bar Association, or GAPABA. Now to our panelists. You should have received in the RSVP landing page each of their bios, and it's now my privilege to introduce them here with additional fun facts about them. First, we have Scott Wilkinson, the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of the Atlanta Hawks. Before Scott became a lawyer, he also enjoyed a notable athletic career. Here's an early photo of Scott strapping it up on the football field, and you can see from a young age receiving attention from cheerleaders. He went on to play nose guard on the Duke football team. That is the position on defense that is typically in the very middle of the scrum once the quarterback receives a snap. And you'll see here also a photo of Scott's 1979 Jake's Tires baseball team in Marion, Illinois, which has a population of roughly 12,000 people. And he had two teammates who ultimately were responsible for where he attended law school, who he married, and his career in sports law. Scott, would you like to actually add any color to that?
I don't want to slow things down too much. It's a fairly involved story, but as you can see, so this is 1979. I moved around a lot when I was a kid. Shortly after this, I moved to Leavenworth, Kansas for my senior year of high school. If you fast forward all the way to 1986, so many, many years later, I just finished up my first year at Washington and Lee Law School and had finished an internship in Washington, D.C. with the Marine Corps. And during that summer, I was randomly talking to a friend who was talking about a grad assistant scholarship that he was going to get at Duke. And I was like, oh, I wish I could get one of those. That would be great. And one of my Marine Corps friends said, well, you know, you can transfer schools if you want. And I was like, well, I've never heard of that before. So got an application, put it in, didn't think about much of it during the entire summer, was driving home to Kansas to see my parents before I started my second year of law school at Washington and Lee. Stopped in at Marion's, had alerted some friends because it's on the way. Got home and I had a letter from Duke Law School waiting for me that says I got in. So I show my parents and they're like, oh no, school starts in a week. You can't go. You don't have anywhere to live. There's no way that you can go. And I was, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to lose this argument. Within the hour, I get a call from John Cavanis, who is sort of right in front of me in that photo. He says, hey, I heard you were passing through town. When you come back through, why don't you stop by, say hello, go to a couple parties. And you know, we'll hang out. And I was like, my parents are a little weird about money. I just got into Duke Law School. They won't let me go because of money. I don't have a roommate. And he goes, a roommate, Duke Law School? Daryl Clarida, you remember him from Jake's Tires? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, he got into Duke Law School and he needs a roommate. And I'm like, there's no way. So I called there. He gives me Daryl's number. This was all before the internet now. He gives me Daryl's number. I call his house on his house phone. I get him on the line. He gives me all the details. And I know how much it costs. I have somebody I can room with, and I go see my parents, and my mom's immediate response was, you have to go. So I end up switching everything around. Daryl's my roommate. First day of school, I'm standing in the drop ad line. I think that's probably done online now. Standing in the drop ad line behind Beth Davis, second year student, who has been Beth Davis Wilkinson for the last 31 years. So I met my wife on the first day of school. Also on the first day of school, I met a fellow transfer student named David Payne. There were only 7 of us in our transfer class. We had a little transfer get together. And David ended up being a good basketball friend, and he hired me years later when he was the senior counsel at Turner Sports to work for the Hawks and the Thrashers and World Championship Wrestling and all the other Turner Sports, which I've continually worked with that group now through various sales since 1999. So just because of these two friends, you never know in your life how it's going to all connect back together. But this one really did in a big way. So
yeah,
thanks.
No, I think that's terrific because we do have a lot of law students on the line. So and I'm looking forward to hearing the stories, 31 years from now. Next, we have Megha Parekh, Senior Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of the Jacksonville Jaguars, an NFL football team that nearly pulled off a comeback victory against the Tennessee Titans this past week. So Megha walks 8 to 10 miles per day while on phone calls. She's figured out how to take nearly all of her calls while moving, calling audibles like Omaha, Omaha, and maintaining her health in an office job. Megha also plays the guitar, and to challenge herself, each year starting in 2018, she plays one solo live acoustic set at a bar. Her 2020 set was scheduled for April 2nd, but due to the pandemic, it was canceled, so she is working on rescheduling that. Hopefully, we will all receive an invitation to that. Next, we have Katie Rodin. Katie is the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of the Anaheim Ducks, a team that was first formed during a formative period in my life growing up in Southern California in 1993. Katie has worn glasses since she was 1 year old, and she was born on Cinco de Mayo. Katie and her brother are also both attorneys for families that own NHL teams, but neither of them have ever played ice hockey. I wonder, Katie, if you played any video games, because that's how I learned NHL hockey.
No doubt, no doubt.
Next, we have Noah Croom, who is the General Counsel and partner of Beautiful Game Group, LLC. Noah hails from St. Louis, Missouri, and when he worked for the NBA team Vancouver Grizzlies, he was described by a former colleague as a capologist. For those of you who are NBA fans, that means that Noah was the go-to guy for matters of signing players and trading players to ensure that they were consistent with league rules. Here we have a bunch of really cool photos with Noah. Next, we have Alan Chang, the Senior Vice President and General Counsel of the New York Yankees. Now, Alan has said that it was his dream job to work for the New York Yankees. And a fun fact about him is that he actually never went to physically watch a home Yankees game in the Bronx until he actually got hired to work for the Yankees in 2000. Previously, he saw the Yankees play on the road in Boston and in Anaheim, but never in the Bronx. For you grieving Mets fans, yes, the year 2000, when Alan joined the club, is when the Yankees defeated the Mets in the World Series in 5 games. Now, Alan and my co-moderator, Michael Wu, Chief Legal Officer of Madewell, the apparel company, were also on the Love Boat Taipei trip together during the summer of 1989. For those of you unfamiliar with the Love Boat, it's a cultural exchange program for 900 Chinese American and Chinese Canadian students. That was a really good year because that was also the same year that the Yankees drafted Hip Hip Jorge Posada. And you'll see additional photos here of Michael showing off on the Love Boat. Michael also attended the boarding school in Salzburg, Austria, and at his graduation ceremony, it was held in Schloss Leopoldskron, the palace that was the Von Trapp family home in the movie The Sound of Music. So this is now an opportune time for me to hand it back off to Michael. Thank you so much for indulging me during this time, and thank you to Bonnie who put together that slide deck.
Thank you, Peter. We're so pleased to be here this afternoon with our outstanding panel of sports lawyers. It's really great to connect with old friends as well as new friends for this panel. Not only did I meet Alan approximately 30 years ago on the Love Boat, but I also met Noah approximately 30 years ago. We met at UVA Law School when he was a third-year student. I was a first-year, seeking advice from him, given that we were all, my sister and I were in the same class, and we really wanted to learn the ropes from those battle-tested third years like Noah. So this afternoon, our panelists will address a wide range of topics in sports law, including challenges that are facing during the pandemic, collaboration with ownership and the front office, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and advice from law students and lawyers seeking a career in sports law. First, I'm going to ask all of the panelists to describe their roles within their respective sports franchises. And then with respect to Noah, please describe your current private equity firm, as well as your former responsibilities as assistant GM of the Timberwolves. So why don't we lead off with Alan?
The Yankees legal structure, we're quite complicated. We have about 7 lawyers who work for the organization. There are 4 on the legal staff. For the legal staff, they're kind of a dual-headed dragon. We have a chief legal officer and myself, the general counsel, and there are 2 attorneys that report to us. There is also 3 business people in the organization who are also lawyers. The president of the organization, the chief operating officer, and the assistant general manager. So we have 7 lawyers altogether, and we all function together in order to hopefully bring home a championship.
Great, thank you, Alan. Katie?
Hi, everyone. My office coworker is a bulldog and he's snoring, so hopefully it doesn't pick up too loudly here. I didn't plan ahead there. So I serve as Chief Legal Officer for what's essentially the sports and entertainment arm of our family of companies. And that includes the Anaheim Ducks, the NHL team here in Anaheim, the Honda Center, which is our arena in Anaheim. We have a minor league team down in San Diego. We have 8 ice and inline facilities, one of which is a pretty new $110 million facility. We just acquired a restaurant because why not? And we're embarking on a multi-billion-dollar 113-acre entertainment district around our facility. I've been with the organization for 13 years now. We have a mighty team of 2 in-house lawyers. But I am fortunate enough to have the immense support of our owner's family office general counsel, who's taking lead on the development side of things, as well as government relations. And then our in-house team focuses on our present and future operations. So as I think with most of the panelists here today, we support all functions of all of the areas of business. And our chairman is also a lawyer, which is also helpful, but I remind him on a regular basis that he hasn't practiced in many, many years. So.
Great, and we missed the fun fact that your brother works for the Las Vegas Knights, so a rivalry there between siblings.
It is true. Yeah, he works for the family that owns the Knights. So he represents one of their arms of their business, which is a restaurant arm. But we do have a heavy rivalry in our family, and the Knights have been playing so well. And I love my brother immensely, but it just makes me sad.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Megha?
So like Katie said, it's sort of similar in the sense that I work for portfolio businesses. So I came down from a law firm in New York to come work for the football team. And I thought that I was going to be the lawyer for a football team. But as people who are in-house know, that in-house counsel tends to, for better or worse, better in terms of a learning opportunity, worse because it can be challenging at times in terms of the breadth of things that you're expected to cover. You collect those responsibilities that no one else really wants sometimes. So I also have HR, which is common, but I have IT, security, and capital development of facilities as well. And so when I first started, I was focused primarily on the Jags, and there are 3 attorneys now that work for the Jags, but that's because we support the Jaguars, Bold Events, which is the music company that we formed when we built an amphitheater just south of the stadium, so it's a 6,000 seat venue. We're similarly doing real estate development around the sports facilities. So we have that arm. We have a pro wrestling company called All Elite Wrestling, which I know is near and dear to Scott's past. So in addition to sort of continuing to focus on legal development, I feel like there are times when I'm pretending like I'm an engineer. Recently got certified as a nutritionist, and then I've been trained as sort of a mental health counselor, and continue that as well, just so that we can support both on the legal side, but then in all the other aspects of the business as well.
You're a Renaissance woman, Megha. Thank you.
It means I know a little bit about a lot of things, but not a lot about anything.
All right, Noah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your private equity firm and then your former responsibilities as GM of 2 franchises.
Sure.
GM.
Thank you. So currently, I'm with a private equity fund. We got together in the spring, and we're currently evaluating several targets. There's a lot of activity in the space. I'm responsible for, along with our outside counsel, forming the fund, working with our outside tax counsel on the multitude of tax issues that arise when you're acquiring teams in a foreign jurisdiction, and we have investors in multiple jurisdictions, so it's relatively complicated, but I rely on them a great deal. So, for me, it's been exciting learning a new area of sports, also diving into a different sport and learning the intricacies of soccer, which I was not very familiar with, but we have a number of people on our team who have experience in soccer, so that's been a lot of fun. When I was with the Timberwolves, I was really functioning in sort of a quasi-legal position. I think Scott can understand this, because I know he's sort of gone back and forth between both. But when I started with the Grizzlies in the late 90s, I was really in a legal position, and it was hard to make the leap to sort of the basketball side and have credibility amongst the basketball people around the table and to be accepted by them. Then after serving as an agent for about 15 years and rejoining a franchise and probably having a greater appreciation for scouting and the work that goes into identifying talent, I had much more credibility in that capacity and spent a lot of time scouting, working with players once they joined our team, working with our sports psychologists. So I really enjoyed having that interaction with the athletes and the coaches, and really working on both legal issues and basketball related issues.
Great. Thank you, Noah. Scott? You're on mute, Scott.
Yeah, okay. It wasn't hitting the right button there. Okay. Yeah, sure. Before I get started, I want to say I did see the list before, and I say some of my names of my old interns, former outside counsel, and some friends. So you know who you are. Thanks for attending. The struggle. Who are we? We're not just the Atlanta Hawks. I work for Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena. We also have a G League team, the College Park Skyhawks, that we added a couple of years ago, and we also have Hawks Talon Gaming Company, which is an esports team. So we've added on. We also used to have the Thrashers, which we sold to Winnipeg. So some things go away, new things come back in. You never get to rest. There's always something new. I have a great legal staff. Karen Cook is my assistant counsel. She's the deputy GC. She's been working with me and tolerating me for 15 years now. She was part-time, so she's been able to raise her daughter and also have a life on the outside. Joe Kennedy has been with me for 5 years now, coming up on 6, and he's been great. Only had a couple other lawyers before him, but Joe's been fantastic. Got him. He was a healthcare lawyer, so those of you that are healthcare lawyers, never fear, you can still make the jump. And then Mary Bro is my part-time paralegal, and she's with me for 16 years. So a great staff, a great group, and we've weathered a lot of things. I'm just the chief legal officer. We all sort of handle the same types of day-to-day work, probably like everybody else on the call: heavy sponsorship, marketing, independent contractor agreements, vendor agreements, sweepstakes, contests, litigation, general litigation. My sort of additional areas, I deal directly with ownership. I'm the corporate secretary and handle a lot of the sort of the upper level issues that will arise. And then up until the last few years, I was the main contact with the Recreation Authority, who owns the land that our arena is on, and I would work through issues with them. I've moved on from that role here in the last year or so. Let somebody else handle that.
Great.
But again, good group.
Thank you, Scott. And as Noah intimated, you had been assistant GM of the Atlanta Hawks as well in the past. So had a nice long run with the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, no, 9 years, 8 of 9 of those years were playoff years. Didn't want to throw that plug in, but I don't have any rings like Alan. All I have is just playoff appearances.
In the future, Scott, in the future. All right, Megha, how has the pandemic affected your role and in general, the role of the legal department, since March?
Yeah, so look, I mean, from March 11th, I was actually in Salt Lake City. We were sitting at the hotel bar. I was flying back on a red eye to come to Jacksonville. We were there for wrestling, and that's when the Rudy Gobert news broke. And so I remember thinking at that moment, I had planned on coming back from that red eye, going home, sleeping a couple hours, then going in. And the second I landed, our head athletic trainer called and said, I think you need to come in right now. And since then, I would say that probably half my time, for the most part, has been spent on trying to keep people on both the wrestling side and the football side safe and to keep us operating. So on the NFL side, each team, the league required us to close down the club facilities. Under Florida law, we were able to be open for time. And then there were specific protocols that we had to put into place regarding to work. We had to put together an infection response team. And I'm our team infection control officer, which basically means that you're responsible for education and oversight over all the protocols. But in the way that one of the best parts about being the lawyer is that you're sort of the hub to all the spokes of the departments where everyone's working in their specific area and you're supposed to support them, and that you get to see what everyone's working on, which is really interesting in terms of just getting exposure to the entirety of a business. That's been absolutely true in terms of our COVID response. So it's everybody from operations to football logistics to equipment to nutrition to training and medical that are all part of the team. And so we've been working together since then to make sure that we're implementing the NFL protocols to allow our players to regularly throughout the period. People and asking them to put their masks on is actually probably most of my job. We do affectionately refer to ourselves as the germ police. And then the wrestling business actually stopped touring because understandably venues shut down. But because we have that amphitheater south of the stadium, we were able to keep the show going with a closed set. So I've just been in Jacksonville broadcasting out of here. There is a show on tonight, so I'll be heading right back in after this panel. But wrestling actually started before football did. And so we implemented testing protocols in terms of when people get into what we call a secure environment. We don't have a strict bubble, but it is a secure environment. And so it's been a lot of doing my best to work with the medical with the uncertainty. I think that there was some comfort in people just being communicated with in a very matter-of-fact way, especially when things started shutting down, again, when schools started reopening. And so it felt a little bit like I became a germ blogger, but just about every day, and especially early on, it was really time consuming, but making sure that we communicate with everybody, trying to give people comfort and trying to be sort of the common, consistent source of reliable information during an otherwise really uncertain and challenging time. And then beyond that, just reminding people that, hey, we just yesterday had an hour-long call with the wrestling talent to say, look, we know that we've been doing 4.5 months and haven't had an outbreak. Here's why. It's because we keep our distance. Everyone's careful about washing hands. You guys have to be better about wearing masks and reminding people constantly that those are the reasons that we've been able to keep on operating without an outbreak. So I think in part, what we've also really wanted to be sensitive to is that home is not the best place for people all the time, especially women, and not being in school can be a real challenge for both parents of kids, but also for the kids. And so being sensitive to the fact that shutdown might have been good at helping to stop coronavirus, but it's had some knock-on effects just in terms of mental health. We were one of the few teams to have fans back. We were the only home team with fans on September 13th on the football side. It really helped that we had a few test wrestling events. We're at very, very limited capacity for those right now. It's only 10% on the wrestling side and about 18 to 20% on the football side. But probably the best win that I've had in the 8 years that I've been here on the Jag side was having fans in that building on September 13th, watching the team win knowing that we did it safely, like we executed safely. There weren't choke points. There weren't people gathering together. People stayed in their pods. People were generally good with compliance. And realizing that after 5.5 months of being shut in, people really needed it. They always need the Jaguars to win, which they don't always get, but they needed to get out and they needed football in a way that I was reminded of and had sort of forgotten about, just in terms of what it is that we're able to bring to people.
Yeah, congratulations. That was nice. Jags are trying to win and not just throw away the season for the #1 pick. Any other thoughts from our panelists? All right. Well, we'll move on now to Alan. Can you describe the function that you play in the sports franchise, and then particularly respect to how you work with the general manager of the team and the players on and off the field? You're on mute, Alan.
Okay,
Great.
so as Scott mentioned earlier, and as the other panelists have mentioned, our roles, legal roles for the organization are varied. I would say that on the baseball operations side, I would probably quantify this less than 2% of what I do for the organization. I do remain available for the baseball operations side to consult in any covenants they want to draft for player agreements, technology deals that they enter into, because now baseball is getting very highly technical. And so I'm available for them to consult and advise on that. But my primary function is more on the business side of the business. So again, as Scott mentioned, sponsorship, marketing, ticketing, non-baseball events, labor matters, all those things, generalist things that we do as in-house counsel. So again, that doesn't really answer your question as to what I do with general manager, because again, that is such a small portion of what I do.
Great. Well, I'm a huge Yankees fan, even though I was born in Queens. When I started picking up sports, I was living in Seoul, South Korea at the time on a military base, and that's when the Yankees were winning all the championships.
Yeah, I was born in Queens as well, in Flushing of all places.
Yeah.
But I've never been a fan of the other team.
Yep.
Always been a Yankee fan.
Right. Same here. All right, Katie. What are the key characteristics or attributes of an effective executive for a sports franchise, and how do you develop those skills over time?
Well, I mean, each sports franchise really does have its own personality. I mean, you can tell just from, our different areas of control and influence and responsibility here on this panel. But generally, for being an effective executive in a sports environment, or at least the one that I work in, is, you have to be nimble, you have to be quick, you have to be willing to wear multiple hats, and sometimes you have 10 hats stacked on your head at the same time. And our business is basically a 24-hour business when you combine them all together, at least pre-COVID. Now, not so much. I crave the days where we had events running and loaded running in the middle of the night, and I can't wait for those moments to happen again. I'm just itching for it. But importantly, because our business moves so fast, and as I think it was Alan that mentioned, our group touches every department. It's essential to be able to connect all of the dots and have the ability and the social skills to connect the business groups together who may not know that they're working on a common issue, or they may be working on an issue that causes a positive or negative domino effect with other business units. And so it's essential that even though we're focused on the task at hand, we're taking a look at the bigger picture and asking ourselves, who else in the organization should know about this or would want to know about this, and to connect them together. And then speed is essential, being comfortable with being fast, which is a skill that you learn over time. But, for example, if our sponsorship sales team closes a deal, they're not going to want to wait a week for a sponsorship agreement. They don't care what else I'm doing, even though they're great and they're wonderful. They don't care what else is on my plate. They want their deal done before it disappears. And so, it's our job to drop everything and do it. But the challenge is when every group expects that. And so it is definitely a juggling act. Another example is our hockey operations department. Like Alan, it's single digit percentage of my time that I work on supporting that group. There are some sports organizations where the the sports operations team doesn't necessarily interface regularly with the legal team. I'm fortunate to have a great relationship with ours. And so when they call, I jump because I want them. I don't want them to be disincentivized by calling me. I want them to know that if they need something, that I'm there. So, I'm pretty upfront and honest with everyone. That is one group that if they call, I will drop everything and handle. And even if it's an IT agreement, even if it's, an issue with charter because, they're not serving the right food, I drop everything. And so really having skills to understand what's important for the organization, which isn't always the most important on my plate, I think is a skill that's essential in this business. And, being comfortable with not saying no, but saying how, and, offering business solutions. And I think that that's something that some people are uncomfortable with. So, I, like most of our panelists, I think, have a rule that, I never say no unless I absolutely have to. So instead I offer other pieces of advice. And my marketing team laughs at me all of the time because, if they have a marketing initiative that's just not going to work for some reason, I won't say it won't work. I'll say why it won't work, and I'll offer some alternate solutions, which will always give a chuckle. Because the last person that would be a great marketer, I think, would be an in-house attorney. But I could be wrong. But the pace certainly isn't everyone's cup of tea. Like I said, it's fast and it's hard and it's fun and it's ever changing. And it requires a lot of support on the back end, whether it's at home or through social circles. I think I'm also a huge proponent, and this is counterintuitive to what I was just explaining, but I'm a huge proponent of investing time on the front end. And so for me personally, what I have found to be my largest area of success was spending the time on the front end with my business groups to bring them up to speed as to why certain things matter from a legal perspective and what provisions mean. I have no tolerance for someone who comes to me and says, I didn't read the agreement, it's just full of legalese. That is where the record screeches, stops, everything stops, and I say, all right, let's clear a table. Let's walk through these legal provisions. They're not scary. Let me tell you what they mean. And so next time you see them, you'll be able to really navigate through. I do it just because I'm a natural teacher and I want people to understand and not believe that this mysterious, legalese is scary. But the benefits that are reaped from it is that by the time I get agreements on my desk, they've oftentimes been pre-negotiated, pre-vetted. The comments that I get from our group are just fantastic. They're talking about indemnification. They talked about force majeure before COVID hit, right? It's a wonderful place to be where we can really collectively dig in, roll our sleeves up, and get in each other's business, which I think is really important. So as you notice, I didn't touch on any hard skills. Obviously, you have to be a strong writer and a strong, you have to have strong hard skill sets, but really to be an effective leader in sports, you have to have all the soft skills and work on them regularly.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you, Katie. Noah, what's the biggest and unexpected hurdle or challenge that you face in securing a position in professional sports?
Well, my path was made somewhat easier. So I went to New York and worked for a firm in New York after leaving law school and was recruited to go work in the NBA league office.
I remember Latham Watkins when you left UVA. Yes.
Yeah, I went to Latham, and from Latham went to the league office, and it was a great experience because I got to meet every GM, every league counsel, every CFO throughout the league. I think that may have been where I met Scott first. But got to form some great relationships, and that really paved the way for a lot of the opportunities that came later in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people reach out to me who are interested in careers in sports, and obviously those positions are very sought after. And in some ways, you really just have to be in the right place at the right time, because there are so many people who are seeking them. And so was really fortunate to go to the NBA. When I was at the NBA, I worked on expansion to Toronto and Vancouver, so got to know both ownership groups in that capacity, and then had the opportunity to go to Vancouver. The team was only there for 5 years before moving to Memphis. I met my wife there, and so the team moved to Memphis. I stayed and really liked Vancouver and liked living there, so I wanted to stay in Canada but still be involved in the NBA, so there wasn't a team there. So I went and worked for an agent, which gave me a lot of flexibility to still live in Vancouver. There's an office in Seattle. The Sonics were in Seattle then, so I was able to go to Seattle periodically, see games, see clients, and we were able to recruit a number of our players from the Seattle area. And so was able to recruit and see players in the off season in Seattle, which is only a short drive from Vancouver. And then when I was ready to make a move from the agency, I had the good fortune of knowing, being able to maintain many of my NBA relationships through my agent career. And so was able to get a job in Minnesota when I left the agency. So I have been very fortunate throughout my career, I think, to be able to sort of transition from one opportunity to the next.
All right, great, terrific. Scott, in your current role, what's the most challenging situation that you faced?
I'll have to go back just because Meg will appreciate this one. Actually, in my legal career, it was when I had just moved. I quit my law firm in North Carolina and threw away my sports agency at the same time to come work for World Championship Wrestling. And at the time, World Championship Wrestling was in an old trucking warehouse in Smyrna, Georgia. So nobody could tell from the outside what it was. So we didn't have people around it all the time. So I show up for my first week of work at World Championship Wrestling. My boss is somebody who wrestling fans might know, is a guy named Eric Bischoff. And really charismatic guy, very creative. But I show up and I'm the lawyer, and I'm clearly not the creative guy. And I start pulling files in my office and putting things together. And I see Eric walking back and forth past my office. And as I'm stacking up all these files, I get his assistant calls me and says, Eric needs to see you in his office. And this was sort of like, probably been there about 3 days. And so again, I've already left my job, sold my house, all these other things. Eric calls me and he's furious. And he says, "You're a spy." I'm like, what? He goes, "You're a corporate spy. I know why they brought you here." I was like, I'm the lawyer. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm just sitting there, I'm bewildered. And he just goes on and on and on about, he saw me going through the files and then I'm a corporate spy. And da, da, da. So it's like a wrestling skit playing itself out right in front of me. I'm just thinking, oh God, I got to go back. I got to beg for my job, all these other things. But I made it through it, and I was honest with him, and eventually gained his trust, which sort of leads to one of the points that hopefully you get away from is all of us know you have to have the trust of the business people that you deal with, or you are dead. You cannot do your job. And when you start off when your boss thinks you're a spy, you can't overcome it. It's just a little more difficult than usual, and it's just in the world of wrestling that I'm sure Megha sees all the time. No, really, the most challenging is one that's going to probably play into an answer later on to some of the questions, which is it was the race situation that we had with our general manager and our previous owner that played out very publicly, that followed the Clippers incident as well. So I'd never been through anything like that. I had a new CEO, Steve Koonin. So it was sort of we learned together. Another one of those situations we built trust with your boss, with the CEO or the president, and we were immediately in the middle of this fire that was very difficult to manage. It was constant PR, things that you never anticipate as a lawyer with your company. we look at the various metrics of what's trending in different places, and you just see, bad.
And you had two hats on at the time, right? You were general counsel as well as
general counsel. I was also the assistant general manager too under Danny. And so, this is one of these situations where I would have to go and investigate an owner and my boss one of my other bosses at the same time. So it's very difficult. But you always have to just remember that the company, you represent the company, that's your client and the organization. So it was a difficult time, not only managing that piece of the investigation of folks that I work for, but also watching the PR. We had internal struggles going on with our ownership at the time, where that opened up power plays for various owners. There was employee morale that was impacted. So we had a lot of sort of culture management that we had to be honest and open with the employees and let them know what was going on. I had litigation prep and litigation avoidance that I was working at the same time. Insurance coverage disputes that came up related to it, as well as on top of it, we're selling the team, which any of y'all that are on the panel that have been through the sale of the team, that is all encompassing in and of itself. So by far the most challenging. I think our company came out better on the back end. I think the process was handled fairly, and we're in a better place than we've ever been. And a lot of it is due to Steve Kuhn and Tony Ressler, who run our organization. And I'll have more about that later.
What's your advice to the more junior lawyers or law students when you're leading a company or a franchise through a crisis?
It's not just you. You have a team of people, and you have to rely on, we had constant communication with PR. We had constant communication up through community relations, because there was a whole community piece to it too, because the community was very angry at us as well. So it was just sort of managing and using all of the parts within your company that have a special role. You can't do it all yourself, but you have to be enough of a generalist to know where things go, as well as also listen out and sort of use your instincts to figure out where's the legal issues in that piece too. And of course, you can't get all of them, but if you get most of them, you'll be able to make it through.
Right.
Exactly. Work with good people, and you'll make it through. It's good.
Yeah, I've led public companies through internal investigations of senior executives, FCPA violations, cybersecurity incidents, and I think when you think about in sports, you're the quarterback in that process of this team, or maybe the point guard in basketball.
Yes, no, and also, I'll throw in another, we also selected an outstanding outside counsel in Austin Bird, and then also got an outside PR firm to help with crisis management, things that I'd never seen before with, taking your website and basically moving all information related to the crisis to a different website, so that your brand just doesn't get hammered all day long over and over again, to just sort of lighten the load on that. So learned a lot, but we're better.
Great, thanks, Scott. Katie, what issues keep you up at night?
Besides my 6-year-old who sneaks into my bed, kicks me in the face. I think there are two. One of them is, what am I missing? What are we missing? We juggle so many balls, and like most of us here, I'm a perfectionist, and I chase the impossible, which is I've got all the balls in the air and they're all perfectly juggled, and so I'm constantly scanning the horizon and our rearview mirror to see what we've missed or what we could have missed. And maybe it's the pessimist in me, but it is something that does keep me up at night. Is do we have everything? And then the second one is when our buildings are open and our youth programs are running, we're shuffling, 15 to 18,000 people for an event in our arena. We're shuffling, over 1 million people in our community ice rinks and roller rinks every year, and more than that in our arena. And we need to keep them safe. Have we thought of everything? And then the COVID environment adds a whole nother layer of complexity. And, luckily for my sanity and my sleep's sake, our operations team, our operations and safety and security team, they're incredible. We're always, several steps ahead, I think, of the curve. but it is also, what are we missing? What have we not noticed yet? What have we not thought of yet? We take it very seriously, the fact that we're custodians of these individuals while we have them and they're enjoying the concert and rocking out and having a good time. And we're, looking at the background saying, is this safe? Are we doing a great job? And we are, but it's a question that's healthy to ask. And it's a question that does keep me up at night, literally.
And just with respect to the pandemic, are there doctors on staff that you've worked with previously, or how does that work in terms of the advice you receive with respect to COVID?
Yeah, I mean, it settled down a lot. In the beginning, it was really interesting. I think we're all clamoring for information and trying to understand, what is this? What are we dealing with here? And really educating ourselves on, what is this virus? What do we know about it? What do we not know about it? Now, looking back, we are so far ahead in terms of information, although we're all learning new information every day. But yeah, it's a whole team. It's a whole team of people. We have a task force of about 30 people in our organization that works on our response plans. We have facilities that are open right now, not our arena, but we have our ice rink and roller rinks that are open for limited programming as permitted by the state and the counties. And so we have, our team physicians that we rely on. We have a great relationship with a really large health organization in Orange County hospital system. So we've leveraged that relationship several times, making sure that we have the information that we need, our protocols working. And then we have an in-house infections team that is technically required by the league, but it was something that we were working on having in place anyway. So we all work together as a partnership, and each use brings kind of different issues, but it definitely is, it takes a village. It takes a village to keep a company around on a good day. And it takes even more of a village to wrap our arms around what's happening now.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Katie. Megha, what advice do you have for aspiring professional sports team executives? And then the second part of that advice with respect to breaking that glass ceiling and becoming an executive of a sports team when you're a woman. Megha, you're on mute, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, I just didn't think I got it.
Yes.
But I would say that as a junior attorney, probably the most critical thing that I had to learn how to do was anticipate other people's needs, whether it was the client or the sort of senior associate or their partner on the deal, but to try and be prepared with not just what the specific deliverable was that they were looking for or the answer to the specific question that they asked, but taking a step back and saying, okay, what else might this person then need based on the information that I'm giving? Because you're at sort of the front lines of either diving into the data room or familiarizing yourself with an issue. One thing to just give this sort of direct answer to the question that they ask, but knowing what they might need as a result of that, I think went a long way towards sort of developing trust from other people to say, okay, we trust that if there's issues, even if I don't know the answers, I'll be able to at least spot them and then raise whatever flags I think other people need to be aware of. And that became critical that people then trusted me to sort of help manage deals, or I think people trusting when I came down to Jacksonville, there's more that I don't know than what I do know, for sure. But I think it was a matter of just being able to understand, okay, what's important. Katie's absolutely right. Like, the sponsorship people do not care that you are otherwise waking up to 4:30 calls from people with symptoms and you need to go set them up with testing. They want their agreements. And they think that's the most important thing in the world. And so being able to sort of know what's really important to each person and focusing on that. And then, you don't need to communicate your entire to-do list to everybody, but what's important to them. Sort of relatedly, and I know that others have already hit on this, but I try to be a bit of a cultural ninja. And so I'm deliberate, and not in a duplicitous way, but I'm really deliberate about what I'm wearing. So my dress and my word choice, my diction, based on who it is that I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to one of our equipment interns and I want them to tell me if they see issues in the locker room and I'm trying to develop sort of relationships, so I have a mole in there, or I'm talking to our head coach, or I'm talking to the city's chief administrative officer or our team president, I will alter what I'm wearing and how I present myself and how I communicate, because what initially this was all very frustrating to me because like, no, like I want to be my authentic self at work. But I reframed my thinking on that to say, no, my goal when I'm to either see my perspective or have enough information so that they feel comfortable, like they feel like they've been communicated with to their level of comfort. So to communicate with people, not in the way that's easiest for me, but in a way that's easiest for the listener to understand what it is that I'm trying to say and what point it is that I'm trying to convey. And that requires a lot more thinking sort of at a meta level about the message and the delivery of it and how I'm relating to the person. But I've found that to be really helpful at because it's not enough to have a good relationship with your peers. You're only going to learn a very small sliver of what's going on. I think you need to be able to talk to every single person in the organization and have them be honest with you and trust you. Which, as Scott mentioned, can be even more challenging when you're professional wrestlers who have a layer of sort of acting in there as well. When we were talking to them yesterday, I said, my two least favorite words, and I had the same conversation with our scouts last week, I was like, my two least favorite words are trust me. No one trusts anyone who says trust me, let alone a lawyer. And I wouldn't do that either. I was like, it's on me to build that relationship so that you guys trust me. What I ask is that you talk to me. Don't think that you're automatically going to get in trouble, or don't think that I'm automatically going to say no. You want to jump off the scoreboard, mascot? That's okay, but let's make sure that we figure out the safest way to do it. You guys want to jump off a scissor lift onto the table? That's fine. I won't look, but let's make sure that we have in the right place, we have the coaches in the right place, and we have crash pads there.
All right. Katie, anything else just in terms of breaking that glass ceiling?
I think we could probably go on and on and on about this topic, to be honest with you. It's so robust. But one of the things that I've always employed myself is slow and steady wins the race. So you're going to encounter individuals who don't appreciate what you're saying or discount what you're saying because of all sorts of things. And sometimes it's clear, why, and sometimes you have no idea. I think if we focus on the negative aspects of it and jump to conclusions as to why is it that I don't feel like being heard in this room? Why is it that I don't feel like this person is giving me eye contact? For me personally, if I focus on the negative, it takes away from what the goal is. And so I look at it as a challenge. If in the past, it's been so long since I've experienced this, to be honest with you, but I experienced it a lot earlier in my career. And especially since when I was younger, I looked really young. So it was kind of a double whammy of someone who looked like a baby and also didn't match the profile of other people that I was working with. But I found that if I focused on the negative things, it prevented me from really reaching what it was I wanted to reach. And so I reframed it to Megha's use her terminology, but I reframed it and I used it as a challenge. And I thought, you know what, I may not convince you that that I'm someone who you don't think I am, but I will convince you that I'm valuable and that I can be heard and that I bring good thoughts to the table and that I'm an asset. And so when I reframed it that way, I made it about achieving, addressing the challenge and achieving the ultimate goal, rather than focusing on what I thought was going on in the person's head. Because you know what? Sometimes someone's just having a bad day, or sometimes they don't want to give eye contact because of something else, or I don't know, maybe they had a neighbor that looked like me or I sounded like their neighbor that they didn't like, and it has nothing to do with my gender or the perceived age that I was. So I think it's really important, and I'm not saying to ignore it. I think it's a healthy balance between recognizing it and addressing it, but also not letting it define the situation, the conversation, and let it not get too far inside your head.
Great. All right, Alan, what's the most valuable advice you've received since you've assumed a more senior position with the Yankees?
I think the most important thing I've learned, the advice I've gotten, is to listen. It is so important to listen to what your client is telling you and what your client wants to do. It's also very important advice that I've gotten is to collaborate, obviously, with all the business units in order to, as Megan and Katie have said, to establish that trust so that they can come to you and freely speak to you on the issues at hand. And another important piece of advice that I've been given is to manage expectations, because as everyone has encountered, all the different business units have different expectations and they want things, yesterday. But you have to manage their expectations. I know we all get pulled in a million different directions, but you have to have the right perspective and know as you're juggling those balls, which balls are going to hit your hand first. And that's the ones you have to deal with. You can't worry about the ones in the sky right now. They'll come down and you'll catch them and you'll throw them back up again. So that is the advice that I've been given from very senior people in the organization, and they are all very good listeners. They're all very good collaborators, and they can manage people's expectations. So that's the best piece of advice that I've gotten.
Thank you, Alan. All right, Peter, I'm handing it over to you now.
Great, thanks so much. And many of you have told a lot of stories about how you have advanced in your careers. And this question is for Noah, but I really want to also hear from others too after chiming in. But throughout one's career, when you look back, there are certain boxes that you kind of feel like, oh, you check that where, I did this work for this client, I did this work for this client, I'm rounding out my skill set, and et cetera, et cetera. As you look back, Noah, are there particular accomplishments in your career that you are the most proud of, that you can point to discreetly and say, you know what, I really accomplished something that was a challenge for me and that I learned quite a bit from?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my to Vancouver with expansion franchise was probably one of the most challenging experiences. Lots of issues no one ever anticipated. When I took the job, I had worked at the league office for a number of years, and as I said, was involved in expansion. But the multitude of immigration issues and issues with players transitioning to it, and while most of us probably don't view Canada as very different culturally, it was a real issue for a lot of NBA players initially. When we moved there, you could not get ESPN in Canada, so a lot of players didn't want to come there. So we had to introduce basketball to a new country, to a new community, and also make our players and their families comfortable. So on a very personal level, as well as a professional level, that was certainly one of the most rewarding experiences. Often when you go to a franchise, it has been established for a while, and there are traditions and traditional roles that people fall into. And so this was great too, because, the staff was relatively small when I got there. So I was called on to do a lot of legal and quasi-legal and even non-legal jobs that really helped me forge a bond with the community and the team, and certainly the relationships I formed with my coworkers there were very strong as well.
I can say our current president over at APABA-DC actually hails from Vancouver. So when she found out that you were on, I that sense of accomplishment, I'm sure, standing up the working with this new franchise and building it up, really has had cascading effects. Did anyone else want to comment on that? Some accomplishments in your career as you look back?
Yeah, if I can jump in here. I started my legal career as a commercial litigator. So you wonder, how did you become GC of the New York Yankees? By starting as a commercial litigator. So I would say probably 4 or 5 years into being a litigator, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed the challenges. I had to reflect on where I wanted my career to go. So I decided to move in-house to a small internet company, which tanked terribly. But as more soul searching occurred, I went and I started submitting resumes, and I was on Monster Board back when it was the biggest thing in the mid 90s, late 90s, and saw a a job ad for a counsel at ESPN. Now, I had no experience that they were looking for in the ad, but I sent my resume anyway. And I was surprised when the general counsel of ESPN called me up, and he was putting me through the ringer in the phone interview, and I was trying to convince him that I had the general skill set that he was looking for, litigation background, some corporate experience, a generalist that he could mold into the attorney that he wanted on his team, as opposed to somebody strictly, as a cable sports lawyer or something like that. And that was it took some convincing, and I could tell that he just wanted to get me off the phone, and I persisted, and he asked me to send him some writing samples, which I did, and then I said I couldn't let him just judge me on the paper. So now I'm living in LA at the time, and so I had to convince him that I was coming back to New York, where I'm originally from, for Thanksgiving, and I needed to get in front of him for a face-to-face interview. And eventually he relented and interviewed me, but I met with his entire team. I just thought I was interviewing with him, but I met with his entire team, and it was not a typical interview. It wasn't like they were grilling me as to what's on your resume and things like that. It was more of a get to know you type of interview, which I thought was kind of strange. But ultimately, I guess I convinced him that I was the right candidate for the job because he offered me the job. And the story goes, I told my wife, being a sports fan, that the ultimate sports fan's job is to work for ESPN or one of those mobile networks, but that I would rank it as number 2 in all my dream jobs, and number 1 would be working for the Yankees. Not knowing 2.5 years later, there was a job ad on the Sports Business Journal that the Yankees were looking for a lawyer with cable sports law experience to help them form their regional sports network, the S Network. And, I had to apply. I mean, I was, settled in at ESPN, just bought a house, just wasn't really looking for a job, but I had to submit my application for this job because, again, this is my number 1 dream job of all dream jobs. So I did. I got a call, 4 months later, because the process was slow. I got the job at ESPN. So the challenges there was really each time you reach a crossroad in your career, you reflect on what you've accomplished, what skills you've acquired through those years, and how you can parlay that into your next position. And again, starting as a commercial litigator to being GC of the Yankees, there's no yellow brick road, there's no path, but it's how you pursue it. So yeah, that's a great slide. And so that was the challenge, and creating that those experiences to lead you to your final destination is always the biggest challenge.
It seems that one of the common threads that has come from each of your answers has been this idea of versatility as a lawyer. You're switching, wearing different hats, completely different clients. Alan, you're talking about, your own career trajectory in that way. How do you, while you're kind of hustling and moving from project to project, client to client, your head spinning, you're trying to achieve perfection. How do you get feedback on your job performance? And what do you do to prevent becoming stale in your growth as a lawyer?
Well, again, I have a direct vein into all the executives in the organization, and I've been there for 20 years. People might say, oh, most people don't stay at a job for 20 years. Are you becoming stale? And I don't believe I'm becoming stale. I actually find every day challenging. This new challenge that we're facing with COVID is certainly the biggest challenge of late. But again, having that direct line to ownership, to senior executives, where they've trusted you over the years, and you've developed that trust. It is probably the best way to get the advice from senior executives, from the people you work with, and it's constantly varied. So we're not growing stale. You're not, running around and trying to find direction. You, at this point in my career, I believe I know the general direction the club is going, how the executives think, how ownership thinks, and how best I can serve that.
I just have to say it's been incredible. Both you and Scott have approximately 20 years of tenure with your respective organizations. That is not easy.
Yeah, Scott, if you could add some color to that too, because you've talked about addressing things ranging from wrestling to sponsorship agreements to, as Alan mentioned, dealing now with the pandemic. You mentioned also this foray of the ownership group getting into esports, which is a completely new and exciting venture, I'm sure, but it forces you to wear many hats. What are, how do you get feedback on your own job performance, and how do you continue to be able to pivot and be agile in what you do in leading and directing your team?
It's funny. I'm pretty sure, even though we have a performance management system that we have in place, I've never gotten one. I think what my fear is I know that if I'm not doing my job right, they're going to stop calling me. So it's, I've had this discussion with some of my junior folks in the past, about titles and those things. Don't worry about what they call you. Just make sure they call you. If they don't call you, then it doesn't matter who you are or what your title is. So, you just have to, that's sort of where I get if the CEO or the owner calls me, and I'm always available, as Katie had mentioned before, never without your phone. Your iPhone sleep does not block anybody that it's a GM, an owner, or a top level executive. You just have to always be available, and your job performance, you'll know it if people continue to call you. And I think the pandemic makes it a little scarier because you don't see people every day, and they don't pop by your office and do those kind of things. So I think I'm getting used to that new flow. But I think that's how you learn it over time. And I'll throw one more in for some of the younger lawyers, because I want to play off one thing that Alan said and then add one additional. I started as a criminal defense lawyer in the Marine Corps, and then was a commercial litigator. So I had been out of school for almost 9 years before I got my in-house shop. And that's a long, long way. The criminal defense counsel in the Marine Corps is a long way from general counsel of a sports team. So just know it can happen, and be patient. Everybody wants to do it tomorrow. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It might happen tomorrow if you've been around for a while, but if you're just coming out of school, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Just be patient. The other piece, I've been lucky enough to move from different jobs, and I think Meg touched on this before. And again, I want to emphasize it for the younger folks. Do the things, if you want to get ahead and grab additional titles. I got the assistant GM title to go with my lawyer title because our assistant GM at one point left, and our ownership didn't want to replace him. And I just started doing a lot of the things that were falling that he was doing. And they're like, well, we pay Scott the same amount, and he can just keep doing that. And you do the things that they don't want to do, the things people don't want to do. So step up and be, we didn't have a risk manager when we started after we got sold from Turner. Hey, I'll be the risk manager. Who's the cap guy? He just left. I'll be the cap guy. Just grab things that you can. You're not in anybody's particular lane. You're not taking somebody's job. That'll get you fired in a heartbeat. Stay out of people's lanes. But if something's laying there and somebody needs to take it. That has helped me more than anything else. Doing things that are just sitting there and people don't want. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put insurance in place. Okay, I'll do it. It serves you well over time.
Sounds like positionless basketball, which is all the rage now.
Right.
Being able to play multiple positions. Noah, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the most important factors throughout your career when you consider choosing outside counsel?
I think now that I've been around for a while, I have a lot of relationships in the legal community, whether it be from firms I worked at or schools. So, I often have trusted advisors who I have prior relationships that I have called on before. So I often go back to those lawyers. But I will say that, because I'm African American and I have a number of relationships in that community, I do try to use diverse counsel and I'd say make a concerted effort to work with minority lawyers, because I know it's a challenge often for them to generate business. So I feel like I have an obligation to them to direct business to them.
I know we've received this question also from somebody. If somebody's thinking about entering into sports law in their law school, we have a lot of law students on the line. What do you recommend, for example, them to think through as they, to the extent you can, because luck is involved tremendously here in meeting people, but how would you recommend they go about trying to plan to enter the business?
That's for me. Well, I always advise students to differentiate yourself. I find that a lot of students want to know what courses I took or what courses will best prepare them. I think that, first of all, you should do what you're passionate about, what interests you. That will give you, that will be most rewarding, I think, for your career. But I'm always looking for people who have done different things, have different experiences, and bring a different skill set to the table.
Thanks, Noah. Next question is for Katie. Katie, I know Noah touched on this a little bit about the things that he considers when choosing outside counsel. How do you go about maximizing the value that outside counsel can bring, and what's kind of going through your own thought process as to, this is something that is appropriate for me to bring in somebody from the outside or not? What is going through your mind when you're kind of at that crossroads?
Yeah, this continues to be kind of a work in progress for me. In all honesty, our organization is not one that loves lawyers. It's just true. And so, my team is lean because of that. And that also dovetails into outside counsel. So the organization as a whole just isn't a fan of having tons of outside counsel crawling around and billing around, even though we all know that that's actually not what happens in real life. And so, how I'm constantly asking myself, how can I make sure that the outside counsel that we're engaging with and bringing in is maximizing their value, both in terms of the tangible value and optically as well, which is really important. So, I focus on finding outside counsel who are heavily business minded, and that when they meet with various individuals in our organization, when they do, it's important for me that they don't convey an air of, I am, a white shoe lawyer with my 3-piece suit giving you, $1,000 hour advice. I want them to come and be somewhat casual and be able to speak the business, and not constantly remind everyone that we're paying a large deal for their time. And so, that's the optics that's there. And so I work really hard on kind of cultivating the right personalities, depending on what the topic is. And selfishly, for me, the largest amount of value is finding outside counsel who are willing to take the leap and distill some of their information for me. So oftentimes, you engage outside counsel and you get a formal legal memo, but what am I going to do with it? I have to review the memo. Sometimes I have to research it myself so I can really understand it. I don't want to, talk about something that I don't fully understand. And then I have to identify what's important to the business, how are we going to apply it, and how am I going to best communicate it to our groups. If I can have outside counsel do some of that for me, that brings an incredible amount of value. And so for that reason, I tend to use a lot of the same counsel over and over, because as deeper they get into our business, the more they can distill the information for me. And it's not a question of laziness, it's a question of efficiency. And I've actually found that our outside counsel have become such great business partners that they'll call out issues that relate to areas totally outside of their purview. and are comfortable doing so because they know it's welcomed. So, you know, finding that value in inside counsel or outside counsel is, it is a challenge, and it changes over time, and it depends on what your topic is, but that's how I've done it.
Thanks so much, Katie. Scott, this next question is for you. I know you talked about some of the challenges that you faced throughout your career with the Hawks. What kinds of diversity initiatives do you currently have in place at your franchise? You know, who in the organization champions diversity initiatives within the organization, and how is that tone set by management as to the priority for diversity goals?
Yeah, no, like I said, and I alluded to it earlier with the situation we had in 2015 and how much we've grown as an organization. At the time, we actually were the first in the NBA, and I think maybe the first in professional sports to hire a chief diversity inclusion officer. Her name was Zing Shaw. She's since moved on to in a similar role with Starbucks International now. She was fantastic in really sort of making us reflect and pull apart our organization and see who we were. She put in a number of initiatives that still continue today. One of the biggest is a thing that we call Courageous Conversations, which is a monthly sort of town hall with every employee. And we'll have different speakers or folks internally who will volunteer to discuss different issues related to race, social justice, issues in the LGBTQ community. And they're like, I know it sounds kind of like just a get together, but if you're ever there, you could feel how emotional that some of these sessions get. And it really is sort of, I think it's brought our company together a lot more. We've even had some during the pandemic too, over Zoom, led by our head coach, Lloyd Pierce, who's really taken a charge and is now the chairman of the coaches diversity committee. I have to make sure I get the name of it right. But Lloyd, it's the NBA's Racial Justice Committee. That's what it is. And Lloyd's been just very outspoken and really a leader in the area, and we're very proud of him. And he's done a great job teaching our young players and letting them have a voice as well. So so we have a coach that sets the tone. We also have an owner who has set the tone with his initiatives related to education, not only in and around Atlanta, but in Los Angeles. And then Steve Koonin, our CEO, which is where it all starts from, he was the one who started our voting initiative at State Farm Arena. We were the first arena in the country to start, and now you see it; it's all over the place. It's only been a month or so, and Steve thought, how can we help? How can we just not have meetings? And how can we take action and try to help the problems that we're all seeing today? And he said, we'll have the biggest voting center in the country. It'll be State Farm Arena. And we've actually made a run through it already. There was a primary runoff, and we were open for a couple of weeks, and had just an amazing setup within. There you go. Within the arena. I didn't know that somebody had a picture of that out there. I have a couple on my phone because it's pretty amazing. And we're getting ready to open again. We're staffing it with all of our employees, so that will be their place of duty during the workday. It will be. We're setting up schedules now, and we're also training a number. And I'll get the number wrong, but I want to say that it's probably 75 or 80 of our employees are taking their time to be trained and deputized as poll workers, so that they can provide assistance to all through early voting. We're not going to be open for election day, but we'll do early voting up until election day. So that's sort of just a high level, but it's an organization that I'm really proud to work for, and I do think that the folks that we have are really working to make a difference. Not only just with action, that we're not just having meetings and donating, but we're actually taking action.
Thanks, Scott. The next question is for Megha along some of these lines also. With the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, today there was just news about the development in the Breonna Taylor case. There's been an intense focus on systemic racism, and many athletes have been leading the charge, and many companies and sports franchises have taken action to confront racial injustice by taking public stances. You have in the NFL, it says in the end zone, end racism, in all of these stances to advance the ball on issues of social justice. What are some initiatives that your sports franchise has undertaken here?
That one.
That's for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I would say that, the league's really changed its perspective in terms of allowing player expression in and around the game. What we've always tried to do, even since 2016, 2017, is say, look, we're not afraid of having hard conversations at work. And so in addition to whatever it is that you might be doing or wanting to do in terms of demonstrating out there, can you talk to us about how you're feeling, what you're thinking? We arranged a few years ago a town hall between a handful of players, a handful of police officers and other emergency responders in town, and they had a conversation that was broadcast live. We had that same conversation, broke our entire staff up, much like what said. We've broken our entire staff up into small where people just get to know one another better, and in a structured environment have hard conversations about race and where people have come from, and we're sharing our stories with one another so that everyone can hopefully live with a greater consciousness and understand why everyone's not experiencing this moment the same way and everyone doesn't come in the same shell. It doesn't mean that we can't all listen and have empathy and build a greater understanding. And I think there is just a bit too much trepidation in the past for companies to delve into those waters. They don't want to do it. Like, you know what, that's not for work. I'm worried about the liability if someone says something wrong. I'm worried about making people uncomfortable. And the fact of the matter is that people were already uncomfortable. They just didn't have a forum or an outlet to say how they really felt at work. So I would say this year in particular, there's two things that we've tried to focus on. One is a significant drive towards voter registration. So making sure that everybody understands how they can vote. We closed, the NFL actually is closing its offices, and all club offices will be closed on election day so that people can vote. Mail voting in Florida is actually quite easy. And the system's pretty well developed here. But so just making sure that people understand that, hey, you don't actually even have to go to the polls. It's very easy to register to vote here. It's very easy to vote. So that's been the main one. And we focused first on players, but then also on our staff and then our fans in terms of the communication. So on Jaguars social media, you will see Gardner Minshew stats. You will also see information on how you can register to vote. The other is just raising awareness and having conversations in terms of how it is that the Black community in particular has been interacting with the police, specifically in Jacksonville. So we have the benefit of having a very good relationship. Our company from the stadium to the courthouse, we were actually accompanied by the police, the local police, who said, look, we at a minimum want to take a minute to understand what it is that you're going through so we can respond. Part of the reason why I missed whether or not this question was to me is that while I fully believe in being present in what you're doing, 2020 taught us all that we have to learn how to multitask a bit. We do have a live event tonight, and then we have the Thursday night game tomorrow. With the Breonna Taylor information, right now we actually are getting questions about how we prepare for a potential protest when gates open and then again tomorrow on the football side. So it's a live issue right now. But for me, one of the most important tactics is to say to people, hey, we don't want to close off the conversation. And if there's going to be a protest, let's make it a protest. Let's not put any of our people, at least, in danger. Let's give you a platform on which you can speak so that you feel heard. And then let's talk about what concrete action items we can take. So whether that's helping, there's a lot of money available that the NFL's made. If that requires, if we're able to then support additional police training, that's a good thing. But let's make sure that we take that conversation to the next level. Specifically, where can the dollars go? What programs can we fund? And what action can we take so that while the dialogue and the discourse is important, real change is also important.
Thanks so much, Megha. I want to, I know that we're nearly out of time, but a couple more questions. For Scott, I know that we talked a little bit earlier, hearing from Noah about some of the things that he was really proud of as far as his career accomplishments, helping the franchise grow in Vancouver. For all of you, you guys probably remember the Michael Jordan commercial about all of the shots that he missed. and the professional failures that helped sort of steal his toughness and his development as a player until ultimately becoming a champion. What was your most disappointing professional experience that you look back on that you can say, hey, this failure really was a fork in the road and it helped me zag this way instead of zigging this way?
Yeah, no, that's easy, and hopefully some of the folks that are still on that are in law firms and maybe are just coming up to become a partner will appreciate this. Obviously, when you come out of school and you're working in a firm, your goal is to become a partner. And when I was at a law firm, the name of the law firm's Morton Van Allen. It's a Charlotte-based law firm, and I was in their Durham office, and it was right around the time I had gotten the call and was going to interview for the Turner Sports job. I was up for partner, and I didn't make partner. So you're like, well, wait a minute, like I'm doing pretty well. I'm billing a jillion hours. What's the deal? Well, you're in a smaller office. You don't bill as high as the guys in Charlotte. You give it another few years. Okay. Well, I go through and I get the job. I find out what my pay is going to be as a senior counsel, and then I get the job at Turner Sports. Time to go. So it was obviously very disappointing because you work so hard and you put in all those hours, but you don't even realize that the great thing that you really want is just right around the corner. If I'd have made partner, I probably wouldn't have gone on the interview. So I'm very appreciative. I actually had lunch at my old senior partner that I worked for that broke the news to me back in 1999 as a adjunct professor at Duke. And when I was speaking at Duke back in the spring, I had lunch with him. And he's like, so what are you doing now? I'm doing the same thing I did when I left Warren Van Allen. It's fantastic. So it can happen. The bad things can turn into good things. You just never know.
Thanks. And this will be the last question. And I'm going to first start off with Katie and open it up to others too. What is the biggest what if in your professional life that you look back upon and you think, oh man, what if that happened? What if this, what if I took that job in San Francisco instead of in Anaheim? Or what if I took the opportunity to work for the Washington Caps here locally where I live instead of the Ducks? What, when you look back, is the biggest what if in your career? And then we'll open it up for others too.
It's the sliding doors question for those of you who haven't seen that movie. I play that game every once in a while in my head. What if, right along with what if I win the Powerball? It is a fun game to play. What if I had chosen this over that? What if I had done this over that? But I think the largest professional what if is what if my husband didn't care about water polo? And for those of you that are asking, what? Many years ago when I was an associate at a law firm, working typical young associate hours, my husband ran an elite water polo club. And at the time, he coached a few of the teams. That was when we had endless energy and endless time. I made a point to go to as many weekend games as I possibly could. It was one of the few times that we can actually spend time together just because of our various schedules. And, over time, we formed some really great relationships with some of the parents of his players. And we're still close to a handful of them. I didn't look at it as an opportunity to network, of course. I was there to watch my husband coach and to watch some really amazing kids play water polo. But one of the parents that I got to know over the many years happened to be the chairman of the Anaheim Ducks. And when I first met him, I was curious because he'd be there every single weekend, and the few times that I was able to sneak away from work and see some afternoon games, he was always there. And so I asked, like, what do you do? I was trying to collect information, like what am I doing wrong? What have you done right? What do you do? And at the time he just said, oh, I'm a lawyer. My background is in estate planning, which was technically true. But what he didn't tell me was that he was the chairman of the Anaheim Ducks and ran the entire organization and used to be an estate planner and is still a licensed attorney. So there was the truth in that. But, over time, I realized like what he did for a living. But by then I had already formed a relationship with him and his family. And, we spent a lot of time together. And he heard through the grapevine, not from me directly, but he heard through the grapevine that I was looking to transition into another working environment. And so, he pulled me aside and said, look, I want you to meet someone. I want to introduce you to the general counsel of the Anaheim Ducks. And of course, I wasn't thinking, oh, great, here's my big break. I'm going to get a job with the Anaheim Ducks. I was thinking, oh, that's so nice of him to introduce me to someone who may know other people who are looking for someone like me. And, during the course of what turned out to be my interview with him, the general counsel and I just hit it off. And, it's history ever since. We're all still 13 years later working together. The chairman, the general counsel who was at the Ducks and is now supporting the family office, and me. So it's a definite big what if. And for those of you who are still in law school or who are starting out, it is important to formally network. It is important to get out there and meet other people in the industries in which you want to be. But it's also so important to cultivate the social relationships that you have and to not always seek something in return for the relationships you form. And I am a firm believer that what you put in, you get out. Maybe not on your own time frame, but eventually you get it out. And that's what happened with me. If I would have sought out looking for a job for the Anaheim Ducks in the traditional way, I would have never landed where I am. So that's a huge what if. And there's a lot of commonalities between the sport of water polo and hockey, I found out. So
terrific. Anybody else have any good stories? What if stories?
So my what if, again, as I was interviewing for positions when the small internet company was bleeding capital, I had an interview with a corporate law firm in San Francisco. Again, I was living in LA at the time, a biotech company in San Diego, and then, of course, ESPN. So, for me, the what if was if I took either of those positions, I wouldn't be here. But again, being a huge sports fan, there was no real choice for me. I had to take that leap, move my family across country, back east again, and there was just no consideration. It's just, again, but the what if is, what if my resume never got across the ESPN GC's table? And I'll tell you, as I was interviewing for jobs, most people have the standard cover letter where it's like, oh, I'm a huge Yankee fan, or I'm a huge this and that, and this is what I've done, X, Y, and Z, hire me. I wasn't getting far with that kind of cover letter. So I kind of changed my cover letter to almost like a marketing piece. My cover letter to the ESPN General Counsel was, hey, are you looking for, someone who has this, and this experience? If you are, read further. And that I think is what caught his attention, because he said right off the bat when we had the interview is, yeah, I am looking for that kind of lawyer. What do you have to offer? So I think you have to flip it on its head at times and really market yourself when you come to that crossroad, and see what don't sell yourself short. See what your real skills are, what you have to offer that potential employer, be it in sports, be it in some tangential related industry, and then work your way to the point you want to be. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We're not going to have time for the Q&A, but in the audience, please feel free to reach out to any of us through LinkedIn. I think the philosophy of the panelists today is really to pay it forward, and if we can help in any way, please feel free to reach out to us. Special thanks to Alan, Katie, Megha, Noah, and Scott. And also want to thank Bonnie Yoon for her terrific slides that she's put together. And then thank you, Peter, and the Wiley team, including Paul Butkin, for all the great work in putting together the program. So thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you.